Welcome to Opera San Jose Talks. This is Larry Hancock, General Director of Opera San Jose, and I'm sitting here with Malcolm MacKenzie, who's singing Don Alfonso, and David Blalock, who's singing Ferrando in our current production of Cosi fan tutte. Cosi will open on September 9th for a run of 6 performances in the California Theater, so it's coming right up on us. These guys have been here for now you've had 18, 20 rehearsals so far, so you've been here almost a month?
I think I've been here 3 weeks. You've been here 4 weeks. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
It's hard to believe, I guess.
Yeah, about a month. That's right. Because David, you came in a little late because we had a sudden change. Huh?
That's right.
So, but thank God you're here.
I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah, and we are all very glad that you're here. I'm going to have to say something about the quality of singing in this show. I have long believed that there are basically 2 kinds of vocal production, those singers who sound like oboes and those singers who sound like clarinets. And we have a whole cast of clarinets. It's a full consort of clarinets. And of course,
I like that philosophy.
That's my very favorite kind of voice. And even though a singer might be a bad actor or a bad whatever, if they're singing like that, I'll be not too displeased. But it's really, really hard for an oboe to win me over. It takes a long time during the course of the night. They have to be really good at what they do. So, and I'm just delighted because these voices blend so perfectly. And of course, Mozart writing comic opera is filled with ensemble when we have so many opportunities.
Indeed.
And there's no pairing that doesn't work. It's just always lovely. And this morning I was listening to all the first chair strings in rehearsal. And it's going to be so different when the orchestra arrives. It will suddenly be Mozart. All right. So anyway, Malcolm, I heard you first. I didn't even audition you, David.
Lucky for me.
Typical to tenor. They never have to audition at all.
Just walk in.
I have 5 and he shows up. Yeah.
So, but at any rate, you have quite an extensive career. You've done a lot of work in Europe, and the credits that are in our house program for you are basically all in the United States.
Yeah, that's true. When I first started out, I ranged pretty widely. And my wife and I, we have 2 daughters. And when our first daughter was born, I was still feeling like I could travel a little bit. But our second daughter was born with a heart defect and had a very, very rough beginning. I had to cancel some work. And then I ended up going to Paris to the Bastille to sing in a production there when she was only about 3 months old and was really still not in very good shape, but we needed the money, so I had to work. And after that 6-week experience of being across the world and not knowing about the day-to-day health of my daughter, who was not doing particularly well, I couldn't handle it, and I ended up switching over and doing almost all my work, not only in the United States, but almost all in the Western United States, so that I'm closer to home. It's probably shrunk my career a little bit, but I'm a much happier human being, and I've had a great time being a father to my 2 daughters, as well as being a slightly better husband. That's just one of those. It's one of those career choices. I feel very, very fortunate that I was able to make that kind of a choice. A lot of singers don't have that choice, and I was able to do it and been able to make it work. At least so far. So we'll see. That's basically the reason.
As long as the opera companies in the West stay in business.
That's right.
Yeah. The fewer and fewer of them.
That's the trick.
Yeah.
Irene Dallas, our founder, did the same thing. She was mostly singing in Europe and at Bayreuth and Covent Garden and those kinds of places, Frankfurt, Hamburg. But she was also at the Met. But then she had a daughter, and she took her daughter with her and the au pair. Okay, they all went. But then the girl turned 6, started school. And Irene quit taking jobs outside the country.
Yeah, it's a choice that if you decide to have children, I think you have to make it at some point. What has to be your focus? I don't know if it's possible to do both in any great way. So I've been very happy with my choice. I wouldn't want it any other way. I was just saying before we started recording now that I spent the weekend watching my daughter, the one who Megan, who was born with a heart defect, playing a softball tournament the entire weekend and hit 2 home runs. So
all right.
This is my life, and I'm very happy with it.
Cool, very cool. I know nothing about you, David.
I like to keep the mystery going to make it interesting.
I know you're married.
I am married to a wonderful singer, actually, Jenny Hauser, who we were planning on spending most of the summer together before I had this last-minute thing come up. And she is in Western Massachusetts right now singing Ariadne, which she has done 4 or 5 times. She's kind of a Ariadne specialist. So
she sings the title role.
She sings Zerbinetta.
Zerbinetta,
actually.
okay.
She's a high flyer.
All right.
A little higher than me, actually. Yeah. But I'm originally from North Carolina, from Chapel Hill. Come from a musical family. My mom is a piano teacher, 30-some-odd years now. And we grew up, my brother and sister and I, singing with my parents in church, traveling all over the Southeast, kind of like the Von Trapp family of Southern gospel. Got into musical theater, then through taking voice lessons, found classical music and fell in love. And my brother and I pursued opera careers, and we've both been working full-time for 5 or 6 years.
Cool enough. Well, the voice is certainly beautiful and with great finesse.
Thank you so much.
I have to say. And Ferrando does demand a great deal of finesse. It's not an easy role.
It does.
Nobody has a damn easy role in this show.
I think you're right.
I do. I have an easy role. But you're absolutely right about Ferrando. And he seems to glide through it with the smile on his face the whole way. I'm very, very impressed.
It's all a facade, but I'm glad it's coming across that way.
Yeah, never let him see you sweat.
Exactly. Go to the dressing room and let that happen. I think on paper I expected it to be a lot more difficult than it is, but I think the brilliant writing of Mozart and the drama and the libretto by De Ponte makes it less difficult than it should be, because it's written in such a way that the character taking over really makes the singing come out easier than it might seem.
I would say that says as much about your interpretation as it does about Mozart's.
Oh, interesting.
I think that this is my own humble opinion, but I think that you make it easier on yourself by doing what they say, and that not everybody's able to do that, I think.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
That's something that, by the way, Opera San Jose it's our little imprimatur. If you're coming to a show at Opera San Jose, the one thing you can count on is it will be the opera that was printed in the score.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer stage directors who actually mind the characters for their humanity, and then let them show us their humanity. And I don't care if we do it in a wrong period or something. We just did La Boheme in the first Christmas after the Great War. Okay, 1918, La Boheme. Fabulous costumes, by the way.
I bet.
Made possible by one of our donors who heard me tell the story. God, I wish we could do this in the first Christmas after the Great War, because we'd just done Silent Night, which both of you know.
Yes.
And I said, well, that was the first Christmas of the Great War. In the very next show, we had the same stage director, the same conductor, most of the same actors, all across the board. It was just basically, here we are all back. And I said, wow, why couldn't we have these guys coming back at first Christmas after the Great War? That would help us understand some of the poverty. It would help us understand a great many things. I would love to do that and to see all the same characters that they just saw back from a war.
Fascinating.
And so I said, but of course we can't do that because our costumes are 1830. So,
Right.
And she says, oh, I'll fix that. She's right there and said, I'll help you with that. And she covered the cost of a whole new set of costumes for La Boheme.
Wow.
Our first set in decades. And I was very, very, very excited.
Yeah.
And the show turned out so wonderful because Collini was blind. And it changed everything about Colline and Chonard.
Oh, I bet.
Changed the whole dynamic.
That's an interesting way to play Chonard.
Special relationship. Yeah.
And they were so, Chonard is kind of responsible for him a lot because the other two boys are preoccupied with women, right? So it ended up that the Chonard was helping the Colline in the crowd scene in Act 2 and making sure he didn't get hit anybody head with his big staff. He had a big walking stick. And they came to me each individually later and said, are Colline and Chonard in love with each other? I said, well, they love each other. They're, from the trenches together. They love each other. But it said, no, are they in love with each other? And I said, Well, I don't care. Why would I care about that? And the next thing I knew, they were in love with each other on stage. But you had to be very sensitive to find it.
Right.
You had to know that's what they were planning to do, because you couldn't really see it. But it was a brilliant performance and moved people to no end. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Mozart. So let's talk about Mozart. And I've learned a great deal recently because I just picked up the Robert Gutman Mozart, which I have always used as a reference book. I just look in the index and find all the mentions of the opera that I'm trying to look up and look that up. I've never just started at the top and worked to the end of the 800 pages.
Wow.
But I started it a few days ago, and my God, in the first 4 pages, I already had enough quotes to give a 1-hour lecture on Cosi.
Yeah.
Just from Alexander Pope and Diderot and Mozart, my lecture is done. I just talk about these guys, their commentary, and how it applied to this work. The weird thing that happens is that art history and other histories don't line up their periods the same. So in music history, we have ancient music that we don't know much of anything about. And then we have the Middle Ages, right, that we sometimes divide into 3. And then we have the Renaissance and the Baroque and the teeny sliver of classical, and then some Romantic, and then whatever we're doing now that nobody knows, right? So it's not long enough to make a decision.
Right.
So, and that's it. But that's not how you study politics. It's not how you study philosophy. It's not how you study history. They're going to not talk about the Baroque and the classical. They're going to talk about the Age of Enlightenment, the Age of Reason. And once you start looking at that, then suddenly you realize that every one of Mozart operas is about Age of Reason philosophy. And Cosi, the most blatant. Well, Magic Flute is the most blatant.
Yeah, exactly.
But the most preachy. But Cosi is truly exactly that. Everything must be examined and studied, and before you accept it, it must follow reason and logic, no matter who it hurts. That's Diderot. No matter who it hurts. And that's Cosi. These guys have assumptions about these women.
Yeah.
And Alfonso says, now wait a minute. Wait a minute. And the guys get incensed. And so they have to research, study, examine, and through reason and logic come to a conclusion. But it has to be proven for them. They have to. It's the scientific method. It has to be proven for them. And so you, Don Alfonso, are I can't say that word because people might listen to this. You disturb things.
Shake things up.
Yeah, you disturb things.
Yeah, I've seen those comparisons, and I do see the opera from that perspective, that it's the Age of Reason, scientific method. There's also a certain amount of ageism involved, where the experienced person explaining to the younger person how the world really is, and then ultimately having to prove it because you can't mansplain anything to anybody. You have to actually demonstrate it. So I do see it from that perspective. I also like to see it just to make it a little bit more feminist in its bent, that I see when Alfonso is making that the men are claiming that the women are going to be paragons of virtue when they probably would never say that about themselves. And that I like to think that Don Alfonso is saying, don't presume them to be anything that you
are not yourself.
Exactly. So
once upon a time in an old production of Cosi, we had a show drop, and it had Cosi fan tutte on it, right? And a little putti up there who had marked out the I and E and it written in an I.
Right.
So
exactly.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, everybody is like this, not just women.
Right. Exactly.
Women,
the expression of the day was Cosi fan tutte, but
yeah.
I like to see.
But that's because they knew that men were dogs.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. If they were talking unter uns, if they were talking between themselves as men, then that would go without saying. At least this is my take on it, because otherwise it gets kind of hard to sell it to half of your audience. But I think that I agree that it's men are like that. We know that, and women are, in Alfonso's view, no different.
Not only are men like that, men are expected to be like that.
Right.
It's expected of you. If a woman approaches you for sex, you're expected to respond. And that's a hard one, by the way, in just day-to-day life. And if a man approaches a woman about sex, she's expected to at least play hard to get. Right? That's the expectation. She's at least...
Certainly, historically speaking,
yeah,
yes.
Of course, I'm nearly 70, so
right.
I'm seeing it through the eyes of the 50s.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, just because when working with this cast, this is... I'm older than everybody else in this cast, which I'm happy to say is a new thing for me. But it's really interesting, because in speaking with the younger people in the cast, I find myself having to be careful about how I say things about this, for the exact same reason, because younger people have a different idea of the way things are or should be. I think I would say are. And I find that refreshing and exciting, but also I have to be a little self-policing, Every once in a while, my dad will say something, and I'll go, "Oh God, Dad," And now I realize that I might be in that same situation myself, going, "Yeah, I say things like that, and then that might be, wow, I don't."
Well, I just landed in this job as general director of a company just 3 years ago, and I was always a grunt. I was never out. I was always the company spokesperson, but I didn't have to be out in the audience at cocktail parties and all this. That was Irene's job. My job was to make sure it all went well by the time she got out there, but I didn't have to do it myself. And I suddenly have discovered I have to watch what I say. You just have to pay attention. And I've become rather Viennese. Most anything I say, you can take 5 ways. But you can be sure that I mean it the best way.
I do not envy your position. I think you're doing a great job, and I applaud all of you out there who do that. But I'm very happy with what I'm doing.
Which is singing Ferrando. And recently, a lot of Mozart, which historically has not been typical for me, but I think it's a better fit than I expected. I don't know. I'm going to venture something, because I used to be a tenor back when I was your age.
Absolutely.
And I think your placement gives you a special freedom in the top.
Interesting.
I think you have ease in the top that comes natural to the instrument itself, because your placement is very far up and back. And that's where a tenor like me has to try to get it in order to sing those lines.
There is lots of trying involved, I will admit. But funny you should say that, because just 4.5 years ago, I was singing baritone repertoire, which I don't know if you knew that. But
no.
I had gone all the way through grad school and did a couple of professional summer programs as a baritone, and had a big gap in my schedule, and I said, you know what, I've been hearing a lot, maybe I should transition, so I just learned a couple of tenor arias, and never looked back. So you would never know it. Hearing my speaking voice out there, if you're listening to this, you would never believe I was a baritone, and I will admit I wasn't a very good one. I definitely think I made the right decision, but yeah, you would never know that I didn't have this top very long ago.
Well, this is funny. All the way through my undergraduate and graduate training, I was told I was a tenor, and I struggled with the top. And 10 years later, I was told, well, why are you singing tenor up? You're a baritone. But I'm clearly a tenor speaking voice.
Yeah. Well,
it's a very high tenor speaking voice.
The good thing about this business is there's never a shortage of differing opinions you can always get, which is really nice.
Yes. Early on, I was actually accused of being a tenor, too.
Really?
Oh, yeah. No way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was both accused of being a tenor and a bass baritone. So I think he's always so modest, but the work that you did as a baritone is clear. I mean, the high placement, sure, you certainly sound like a tenor when you sing, but there's it's clear that you knew what you were doing as a baritone too, because you sing with a lot of skill, and that's not something that you just wake up to in 4 years of being a tenor. So I'm sure that you were a skilled baritone as well. But I'm very glad you're a tenor because you're a great tenor.
Well, there's definitely less competition for me as well, so I think it worked out for for both of us.
Exactly.
Yeah, now that the bear hunks have taken over the world.
Yeah, right.
No,
It's better for all of us to be a tenor.
Don't even start. I'm glad I missed that wave.
Oh, really? It's astonishing.
Oh, yeah.
I just saw Lucia in Santa Fe, and the brother Enrico. They had to figure out a way for him to appear with his clothes off, because he's like an underwear model, and they made the time when Lucia would normally have gone into his office, right, and had a talk with him at his desk.
Yes.
Instead, it was in his bedroom, and he was in bed, and so he didn't have a shirt. So the whole scene was kind of creepy, because there they are in his bed, he's half naked, and they set it in Victorian England. So what is she doing in his bedroom, number one? And what's he doing with his arms around her and no shirt on in his bed? And it kind of was creepy. The first performance was creepier than the second. They got it a little,
toned it down.
Yeah, it was a little less
maybe
physical.
That's why she went crazy. Just putting it out there. Yeah.
Well, Larry, I don't know what these things are typically like. I hope you don't mind me throwing in a little teaser out there for the audience. There will be no shirtless men in this cosi. I don't know what the expectations are, but I just want to throw that out there.
David, I don't think you've seen the costume designs. Have you seen your Act 1 opening scene costume?
Yes.
Okay, it's not shirtless.
It's not shirtless.
It's not shirtless.
But I was very excited when I saw these designs and started doing the staging for Act 1, because you really get a sense of these soldiers. You know, a lot of Mozart tenors get accused of being kind of weak, men in general, and kind of boyish and not, ready to fight. And I think this production does a good job of setting Guglielmo and Ferrando both as like really intelligent, educated, trained soldiers from the get-go, which makes the rest of the story much more believable. So.
Well, that's my big complaint about Cosi. Brad first came in 2007 to do Cosi, and it was my first year as director of production. I've had 50 jobs in this company. And I kept most of them. So I called him up to offer him Cosi, and I said, Brad, I'd like to offer you something, but I'm kind of embarrassed to even offer it to you because it's such a horrible opera. And he said, what opera? And I said, Cosi fan tutte. And he said, what? It's a wonderful opera. I love that opera. And I said, oh, Brad, it's a horrible opera. I don't know how anybody could do anything with it. It's always garbage. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, well, it's beautiful on paper. The story is wonderful. The music is divine. But every time I see it on stage, I can't wait to leave the room. I just hate it. Because you've got two stupid men who are buffoons and two stupid women who fall in love with buffoons cheating on their buffoon boyfriends. And I don't care about any of those people. I don't care what happens to them. So get heartbroken. It was John Wayne who said, life is really hard. And if you're stupid, it's really hard. I don't care about those people. He said, Larry, those are all directorial choices. It doesn't have to be that way. I said, well, I'd like to see it some other way. Well, now Cosi has become my very favorite of the Mozart operas. That's
Really?
kind of blasphemy, because I should say The Marriage of Figaro.
I'm interested in that.
But Cosi has become my very favorite. I've always liked the concept of these two men who have such faith in these women. But it's rather formal, isn't it? It's rather formal faith.
Right. They don't really know them that well.
It's kind of formal. They're going to marry them, but what was marriage in those days?
Sure, yeah.
And then they do this trick where they switch women, and each is trying to seduce the other guy's girlfriend. Well, that sets up a problem. Because what if the other guy gets to first base and you're still at home plate? And it becomes now a contest between the two guys.
That's what Alfonso's counting on.
Yeah, it becomes a contest. So if he's going to get his hand on her knee, damn it, I'm going to get, they're determined. They become determined. And through pride, they brick by brick just take apart their happiness, brick by brick, scene by scene.
And that's the crux of the bet for me. There's a particular spot. Actually, it's very lovely how Brad creates it in his staging, in where you start to see some cracks appear on Dorabella. That she is actually kind of interested in Guglielmo, just a little bit. And it's very well set up now that I'm sitting in a chair and they're on this bench over here, and I actually see it happen. And from then on, he knows he's got him. Because as soon as one of them goes, he's got them both.
Yeah.
And that's the crux of it, is it becomes about a competition between the guys. And guys will compete until they're,
Yeah, the best of friends.
Right.
Will go at it hammer and tongs.
Right.
Until they're completely used up.
Yeah.
There's so much humanism in this piece. I find it, people think it's farcical, but it's not at all. It's about human relationships and how far you can push them and then not be able to retrieve them afterwards.
And the amazing thing about Mozart is he's so even-handed all the way through. Everybody is constantly getting really beautiful music, really telling music, and he never condemns anybody's actions. Not even in Don Giovanni.
Yeah.
He never condemns anybody. He's absolutely even-handed. He says, you want to see a human being? Here is a human being. Look at that person. But he doesn't condemn the person. Mozart is becoming my god. The older I get, it wasn't so much so in my youth. It was more like Rachmaninoff, and Chopin.
But that's the great irony
gods.
of Mozart as a musician as well, is that he's one of the first. His music is the first you may encounter. As a singer, what do they end up giving you? They give you Mozart and you start learning it when you're young. But the thing is you don't get it. At all, then.
And maybe at least for tenors, maybe we don't get it because it's impossible to sing.
Yeah.
And we hate Mozart.
You go into that glassy-eyed place where you have no idea what's happening on stage. You're just thinking about singing, which is dangerous.
Where are my tonsils at the moment?
Exactly. That's a tough line to tread.
Yep.
Yeah, well, there it is. Some French tenors are like that, too. Well, I promised that I would get you out of here because you have to go directly into a rehearsal.
Yes, we do.
And so
they can start without us. It's fine.
Not at Opera San Jose, they can't.
This is a real ensemble show. We have to be there.
This is true. Everybody
we've
has
been
to be
talking
there.
all through the bows. By email. And I said, I think that all 6 of them should enter at one time from both sides of the stage.
Oh, I would love that.
And everybody come out and take a group bow because it is truly an ensemble show. There's nobody who is more important or has more. It's a truly ensemble show. And then to take individual bows, sure. But I would like to see everybody come in and bow. I don't know if that's how it's going to end up. I'm not going to die on the hill over it. But it just seems correct because there are few ensembles that are this even. It's just really even. Well, my dear friends, thank you so much for coming in and chatting with me and letting us put it out on wherever the hell it is we put it out.
Where do they go? Yeah.
Yeah, we put these things out somewhere.
Our pleasure. Thanks for having us.
All right, guys. Have a good rehearsal.
Thanks, Larry.
Bye-bye.